on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. And now, in Disney.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome in to our program tonight. Barbara Anderson, Watchtower researcher. She speaks out tonight. She is going to be saying some things tonight maybe you've never heard. But anyways, Barbara Anderson is an unstoppable advocate. We've been talking about it all night tonight about child problems, child molestation, sexual perversion, all of that goes on in the Watchtower. She's an unstoppable advocate for child protection and an outspoken critic of Jehovah's Witness corporate entity, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. She realizes that the Watchtower Society is very harmful. They have unduly influence over Jehovah's Witnesses. They protect sexual predators. She's an expert as well on Watchtower history. She's been interviewed on major television stations and radio programs because of her extensive research on child sexual abuse. From 1982 to 1992, she was a volunteer worker at the Watchtower headquarters in Brooklyn, New York. From 1983 to 1989, she was assigned to the construction engineering department staff as a secretary and later advanced to researching zoning issues. Because of her demonstrated research accomplishments, she was transferred to the Watchtower writing department in 1989. From 1989 to 1992, she researched the Watchtower's history for its official 750-page chronicle, Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom. That was published in 1993, and Barbara was involved in that publication, as well as writing numerous articles for the Watchtower publication Awake. And while working for the writing department, she discovered numerous documents concerning people and events that were not known to the part of the Watchtower's history, which was included in that new history book, Proclaimers. So we have Barbara Anderson is here with us tonight. Let's bring Barbara on. Hello, Barbara Anderson.
Well, good evening. I'm pleased to be here with everybody.
Well, we're glad you're here with us, Barbara. I just want to do a little sound check here. So just count to 5 for me.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right. Well, it looks like things are good. And thank you very much for clicking on that link. And we're glad to have you on with us here tonight. It's a real pleasure. And when I mentioned it, I put up a promo yesterday on Facebook, and my goodness, people were responding like crazy. The one thing I do know about Barbara Anderson is she's a facts woman. And at times she gets on my case a little bit too. She wants to make sure that I stay on the right trail, but she deals with facts. Barbara Anderson, so what she's going to deal with here tonight is facts. So that's what she's known for. And she's helped so many people. I can't tell you how many programs she's been on, but she'll tell us all of these things. But tonight we're going to focus on a few situations that I think are very important. I first found out about Barbara Anderson back in 2002, and she was on the Dateline program exposing Jehovah's Witnesses and how they're covering up child molestation, sexual abuse in the Watchtower. That's where I first kind of come to grips with Barbara. And that's where a lot of people, that was, I believe, her initial plunge at exposing the Watchtower. And she did a wonderful job. I mean, how could you walk away from listening to that program and believe otherwise? But in the meantime, I mean, that's going back 20 years ago. But in 20 years, she's done unbelievable things to expose the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I have to put her right up there as a premier apostate against the Watchtower. So anyways, Barbara.
Goodness.
what we're going to do, I got to build you up. I mean, I've known you for a while. I mean, I can't have you come on here and just, oh, here's Barbara Anderson. I've got to say something because a lot of people do know you. Now, here's what we're going to do. Well, we're going to go little by little. I know you have so much pent up inside you that you just can hardly wait to get it out. But can we just kind of talk about the Dateline program a little bit first?
Of course. Mhm.
All right. And we do have a big listening audience in here tonight. I do want you to know that. But, my first encounter with you was the Dateline program. I thought it was well done, but tell us how it was delayed. And I'm going to be popping in here, kind of like interviewing you, so we'll keep you right on track. So tell us about that Dateline program.
Well, one of the former Jehovah's Witnesses that I first met after I left the organization in 1997, and I didn't attend the memorial in 98, so apparently that was a clue that I wasn't coming back. And I had been busy for 6 years after I left Bethel in Brooklyn. I was an outside researcher for them, and then I couldn't do it anymore because they weren't doing the right thing in behalf of the child abuse situation. So I made myself very busy. I thought I would answer some questions I had in my heart and mind for years about that I didn't have time at headquarters to look into. So I started to do some research, and I thought to myself, if I had a question about Charles Taze Russell, and I said, if I can prove that he has lied in a certain situation that I knew about from my research, then I think I will do a historical job on him and really research he and his wife. So I had this question, and the answer lay in Australia. So I wrote to the courthouse in Melbourne, and the answer that I got back showed that he didn't tell the truth. And so then I embarked on something else. I went to college because I felt that I needed that. That was the beginning of not doing much in behalf of the witness stuff. So after I was there 2.5 years, I had a scholarship. And then I decided, because I knew that Russell wasn't telling the truth, I embarked on the deep study. And while I was doing this, I began to meet a lot of former witnesses. And I got on a program, a discussion board that was very popular back then, Jehovah's Witnesses.net. And met many people and discussed a lot of things. So there was a fellow that got on the program who was an elder, and he was very unhappy over a situation in his congregation to do with child abuse. So I knew a former circuit overseer, and I asked him to, everybody was posted not in their own name. So I said, would you talk to this fella through the private part of the discussion board and see what his problem is? And so they talked for a few months, and then the former circuit overseer had a heart attack, and so there wasn't any more associating with this man as to talking about the issues of child abuse. So I wrote this fella, and when I did, I didn't identify myself as a woman. I just forgot it was the issue. I've always been interested in the facts, as you said. And so I talked to this man just through email, and we decided to meet. And there were other ex-witnesses, males, by the way, who were also very interested in me and as a woman and what I did at headquarters. So little by little, the word was getting out. I spoke privately to a number of people. got together up in Canada and also in Florida. But everybody was agreeable to keeping my name out of no publicity. Then the one man out of Washington State, who is now deceased, he was sending off material about Jehovah's Witnesses to newspapers over the years. So he sent something out. Christianity Today did an article about Jehovah's Witnesses around, I don't know, 2000, somewhere around there. And so he sent something about that article to the religion editor of the Courier Journal. And that religion editor was fascinated with all of this. And he put together a very large, well, it really was a very well done article. And that article, plus some of the men that I had been talking to, plus the one initially who was talking to that ex-circuit overseer, he kind of stood out, and he had a lot of chutzpah. He wasn't backward about speaking of peace.
Excuse me, Barbara. I'm gonna pop right in here for a second. Now we are hearing you fairly good, but I think we could hear you better. Is it possible to speak closer to the microphone, or is that possibility? You're speaking through your computer, right?
Yes.
All right. We can hear you, and it's good, but I'd like to get you a little more clear if we could. So I because people really want to hear. I mean, they can hear what you're saying, but let's try to get as clear as we can. So that's good. I think you're a little bit closer now. So just count to 3 for me.
1, 2, 3.
All right, that seems to be a little bit better. So let's go with that. I hated to interrupt you, but go ahead, go back to what you were saying.
Well, the article in the Courier Journal is in Kentucky, and it was a very, very important article. The newspapers were sold out all over Kentucky and the states around there that had news boxes, and you could see the heading of that paper. And it said about Jehovah's Witnesses and child abuse. So I suppose many people in those areas have been accustomed to Jehovah's Witnesses coming to their door and making them feel like they weren't very important, but Jehovah's Witnesses had the truth, because, I mean, every paper sold out. That night, the Courier Journal put on a detail of men to do a night shift, and they printed more papers. So this was extraordinary. My name was not in there. I asked that it not be in there. And we had some extraordinary people speak up and give their experiences of what happened to them and their families because of the child abuse, and it being treated as a sin and not a crime. So there was somebody in New York that was contacted, and that individual knew somebody, of course, somebody knew somebody at the NBC Dateline. And the fellow that was talking to that circuit overseer, he had left the organization by then. It was only like a year later. It was 2001 and the beginning of the year. So he talked with a producer at Dateline, and that man was the head of that part of Dateline. That they have so many different producers. So the fellow that was the ex-witness elder that was so upset over a child abuse case himself, he became kind of a cohort of mine, and he appeared. That was Bill Bowen, and he appeared on the Dateline program. We actually recorded it in March of 2001, and it was supposed to be on television by November of 2001. But of course, we know what happened in New York with 9/11. So the program was put off until the following May 28th. And the producers that were assigned, specific people were assigned to our recording. I had to go to different areas for the video. So did Bill Bowen, and it was a very difficult time. It was exciting, but at the same time, it was very difficult because we were going to do something that really would shake up this organization, and we also knew that we were going to be shunned ourselves, or just disfellowshipped and shunned. We'd lose our families. We thought it would be very, very problematic, but we went ahead anyway. It was too important not to. Too many people were suffering and had to stop. So that's how this whole deal with Dateline came up.
Well, Barbara, I'll have to stop right there. In fact, people writing in on YouTube, and one person here, Martha's writing in that Dateline episode actually woke her up. People are making fantastic comments, and that was one of the hardest things. I think that I'm just thinking out loud here that's probably one of the hardest things you ever had to do in life. Was that?
I did. We went to Indiana, where our son lived, with his wife, and they had a child who was, I think, 2 years old then. And we made a special trip to tell him in December of 2001, that sometime in the spring, about this program. And our son was an elder. Had been in Bethel too. Our son was in Bethel 16 years. And we were there almost 11. So my husband had been at Bethel before, and so it was just so interesting that the three, in 20 years later, our son was 19 when he went into Bethel. So our son was quite shocked over all of this. I didn't talk. What I knew, which was a lot about what's going on with the child abuse, that I didn't tell anyone. I'm a very vivacious person, in the sense that I never lack for talking about something or other that to me is very interesting. But I did not say a word. And it really helped a lot, because in the long run, they couldn't get anything on me that before I went on Dateline. They were trying to disfellowship me from the local congregation, and they couldn't, because I didn't spread any gossip about the organization, and the witnessmen in the congregation knew that I was still working for the writing department for all those years. So lots of times I wasn't at the meetings because I had a schedule. I was researching for other writers, their articles. It would help them. Plus, I did a few of them after I left Bethel myself. So our son, we thought maybe he would get over it, but he didn't. And the following March, we didn't know still at the time the date set for our Dateline program. So he came here with his wife and little boy, and that's the last time we've ever seen him. So we don't know where they even live. They've cut us off so completely that we don't know where they are. We're not aggravated with them or angry or anything, because she was a very active witness. Her father was a tremendously active elder in Indiana, and all of them are, he and his 5 children are very musical. And years ago, when they had a little orchestra at the assemblies, this man was always the leader of the orchestra, and his kids all played instruments. They lived Jehovah's Witnesses, and ours too. And now the daughter-in-law's parents are both deceased. situation is, well, we and managed our son's mind, make him a very, very loyal to the organization. His.
Well, let's hold on. Let's hold on right there, Barbara. No, it's very fascinating, and I really appreciate you wanting to come on and share some things with us. What I'm going to bring up here tonight is when you first came on Dateline back in 2002. I was still a card-carrying, time-reporting Jehovah's Witness, and I can remember, in the Watchtower study. I saw it at NBC where they had a little preview, a trailer of the program on Dateline, and they talked about the witnesses. So I saw that, and when I went into the Watchtower study, the Sunday before the program aired, I brought it up in a comment in the Watchtower, and I kind of got in hot water for that. But I brought up in the comment that I says, brothers and sisters, you're going to want to watch something coming on NBC this week. And it's an expose all about the Jehovah's Witnesses and how they're involved. And I did say to the whole congregation through the microphone system that they're going to be talking about the witnesses and some of the things that they're hiding in this organization. I mean, that statement would get you in trouble in a Watchtower lesson. And sure enough, right after, the Watchtower ended, I got approached by a couple of elders. Why'd you bring that up? I says, well, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're going to be talking about us on NBC. So do you know what the program is about? I said, well, I got an understanding that they're going to be talking about child sex cover-ups in the Watchtower. Well, how do you know that's true? I says, well, I got to watch the program and see. But they were really ticked off that I brought that up. But Barbara, I'm going to tell you that was the catalyst. That was one of the things that moved me to the exit door in the Jehovah's Witness religion. Good job. Good job.
Oh, thank you. And I'm glad it helped you. With so many work behind me, too. This is just me. There were elders who met with one producer in New York, and we'd have lunch with him and verify that what we were saying was true. I was disfellowshipped just a week or two before Dateline aired. They waited that long until they could figure out how to get me out. So I was disfellowshipped for, let me think. I can't even remember, something about a bad association or something. And it'll come to me. I'm at that age where I forget some of these details that I used to remember, but the point I'm making is that we had wasn't just me, had to convince the NBC. The last few months that I was at Bethel, I made up a package of material that went to the governing body. I did it for the Awake editor, and I was gone from Bethel 2 weeks when every one of the governing body received the package to outline how severe this problem was internationally. So the lawyers at NBC were concerned that powerful Watchtower would sue them if they put this program on. But I gave them the copy of the package that the governing body had. And after they read all that evidence, they weren't worried about the Watchtower suing them. And there were so many letters in there from there was one psychiatrist who wasn't a witness, and there were many witnesses that were mental health clinicians, and of all sorts. They some were, most of them were elders, by the way, and the Watchtower had long turned its nose up at mental health care. If you have, I remember that we were told if we read the Bible, went to meetings, and out in service, that would cure all. Well, it didn't cure all. And through that package of material, that so many of those excellent letters in there came from men in this organization and some women who were experts in the field of mental illness, child abuse, etc. And it was a year later that the Watchtower at an elders school that they said that it would be fine for the brothers and sisters to seek out experts in mental health. Just be careful that you don't get convinced that they got the answers and we don't. But that opened up the way for more than just the help with child abuse. The awake editor was the one who was behind this. He was extraordinary because when he found out about the situation, he wanted to do something about it. That's a long story. By the way, on my website, Watchtower Documents, I recently put up, it's not a long diary, it's a short diary. It's I don't know, 6-7 pages. It's just a list of everything that went on, as much as I put in that little notebook before Dateline aired. For that year, all the things that went on, I made a notation of it. And it's quite interesting when I look back over it 20 years later. So that's why I put it on my website. So a lot came out of that, including I heard reports from people who told me how some were reacting at headquarters, and Ted Jarris was very open, talking to someone who is a relative of his wife, and he was having dinner with him out in Canada somewhere. So he expressed himself, and he thought Armageddon was right then and there. That's 2002. And he applied me to some evil woman in the Bible somewhere. It wasn't Jezebel, although I have posed for Jezebel. Oh, my arm slipped off my but I did it. An artist did a picture of me of Jezebel in one of the old books. And so I have that. That's my big credit right there. So he said that it was only a matter of months that he thought Armageddon was going to be here. Well, look at it's over 20 years. And he's deceased.
Well, people still, Barbara, people still, that was the real first time that a former Jehovah's Witness appeared on television. The first time I can remember.
There was one before that, though, on CBS. I was on NBC, and it didn't work out. It was that Sawyer woman, and they talked about some things that didn't fly well. And so nobody wanted to do anything more. It didn't get the ratings, and it wasn't about child abuse. And it was it's kind of sensational.
Yeah. Well, I know that the Dateline show was kind of postponed because of the attacks on the Trade Center.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. it was gonna play, what was it, that week? And then of course the planes hit the Trade Center and they moved it up. So that was a terrible thing all the way around. Yes. And boy, a lot of us were waiting and said, oh, we want to make sure Barbara comes on. We weren't sure, but you did. Now, I mean, we get a lot of people listening in here tonight. Can we open up the phone lines and let some people talk with you?
Of course.
Yeah. Let's open up the phone lines, and I'm sure there's some people have questions about the Dateline program and what have you. So if you'd like to say hello to Barbara, I mean, she's on here with us tonight. Let's take advantage of it. She wants to come on and do hopefully a series of programs on her trek in the Watchtower. So if you'd like to say hello to Barbara, by all things, just come on right now and hit *6. Speak up, say hello to Barbara. Well, give them a second, Barbara. We got a lot of people listening in. So what would you like to say? Go ahead. You're on with us.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I would like to know about Mr. Jerry Bergman. Have you had any contact with Mr. Bergman?
Not anymore, I don't. I did years ago. He invited Bill Bowen and myself to Orlando. That he was, there was an anti-cult organization that was having a conference in Orlando, and that was our first appearance after Dateline Public. I think it was after Dateline. I don't think it was. And I got to know him. Saw him over the years. I was in, let me think, Chicago. The witnesses were having yearly meetings in Chicago. It was they had a organization, and Jerry was there, and his wife. So over the years, he's made, like us all, we've all grown in different directions. And so he's long retired, and I don't know the situation with his health. He's a very fine man, and he certainly has some good books out. He did a fine work years ago categorizing all of the books that came out on Jehovah's Witnesses over the years. So is there something particular that...
Did he see any of the Jehovah's Witnesses while he was up there in New York City to help out with the mental illness when the witnesses were having problems like that?
I wouldn't know that.
Yeah, well, let me step in here, Barbara. I know Dr. Jerry Bergman. And just for the audience here, he's old now. He's been on the program a number of times in the past. But Dr. Jerry Bergman wrote the book, Jehovah's Witness and the Problem of Mental Illness.
In fact, it's right behind me.
Is it behind you?
You're seeing books, and if I was to move over, one of them is laying on its side in this right here.
Yeah, well,
one of them is here. Look.
Oh yeah, no, you got the book. I got the book too, but it's out of publication now.
Yes.
You got it. Why don't you hold it up if you can find it?
Here it is.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, there it is. Well, there's the book right there. That book right there, Jehovah's Witnesses and the Problem of Mental Illness. That was written by Dr. Jerry Bergman. And in that book, he just goes on and on and on how Jehovah's Witnesses have more mental issues than any other religion, 4 times as many mental illnesses. And we've had him on the program a number of times in the past. He is quite a man. He was getting back to your question, David, he was a psychologist and he worked with the Watchtower. And so you were asked, your question was what?
I was just wondering if he worked with any of the Jehovah's Witnesses from up there in New York City there.
Well,
because I got to meeting years ago.
Yeah, well, according to what he did say here on the program, when he was younger, he did. And he worked right along with the Watchtower, advising them on psychological issues. But I'll tell you what really ticked him off, and Barbara might even remember this, but he was at a convention, and there was 2 or 3 little babies, I think it was 3 little babies died because it was very hot. And the mothers were putting the blankets over the babies. And I can still remember him talking about this on our program. And this is what really ticked Dr. Bergman off. So he went to the administration and said, we have to make an announcement that, we have babies that have died here because of heat problems. The mothers have got to take the blankets off the babies in the little carriages. And they said, no, we don't make recommendations. We don't really talk about that over our PA system. Can you imagine that? So that was one thing that ticked him off. But a good question, David. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, he did an excellent job of interviewing Covington, the lawyer. And that information is out there. And Covington said things about the organization that no one else would know about. And so Jerry has been interviewed also not that long ago by a videographer who is working on a film about Jehovah's Witnesses internationally. And so that was maybe 2 years ago. So Jerry was still active, just like Jim Penton is still so active, even though he's going to be 90. I guess Jerry is probably up there too.
Yeah, I've been trying to get a hold of him. I have written to him recently and still trying to make contact with him because I'd love to have him come on. And, I want to really encourage him to, to bring that book back. I've had so many people ask me, Rick, can you get me that book? Can you get me that book? That book is in popular demand, but it's out of print. It's out of print. I'd love to see him bring that book back. Yeah.
Barbara, I'm David in Virginia, and I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, but my wife was a Jehovah's Witness for the last 35 years since we've been married. And the thing of it is I wanted to know if there was any other Jehovah's Witnesses that were psychiatrists or psychologists in the Watchtower still thinking and doing these magazines like that.
I really don't think so. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I do know. There's ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that are mental health practitioners. I mean, they've really got the Bonnie. Is it Bonnie Simon? I can get a list up and send it to Rick. I think there's like maybe 4 or 5. So there's one fellow on. There are many people. His first name is Rodney. I don't know these people, although I have so many stories to tell. I mean, I haven't met these people, but they know me, and so I can locate them. One of them is just recently, I believe. I'm not quite sure, but she took over a big organization, mental health organization. So the people that I interviewed that were in the mental health business, they are all deceased. That was 20 years ago, and they were all up in age. I have many, many stories about contacting them, talking to them, the letters that came into headquarters from acting elders, active elders, and who were knew what the problems were and how to deal with it. And those letters went to the governing body, and they've gone to lawyers around the world because I usually talk to lawyers who take on cases of Jehovah's Witnesses who are suing the society. And when I know of the case, and I don't know the lawyer, I make myself known and I send them documents and more documents so they can understand how this organization works. There are so many ways that the Watchtower handles child abuse in court that's different than lawyers for the Catholic Church or the Episcopal Church. It's this. They just have a whole different way that they do things, and lawyers need to know that. So I send them the package that went to the governing body so they can read about what happened back then. I have one letter that is, I think, 13 pages from one man, and it was really pointed about the hundreds and hundreds of people that. In fact, I think he said over his career, there was as many as 3,000 3,000 JWs that he treated as for these people who had mental illness. And he told the society, and he said, you have to change how you deal with this. And he mentioned the child abuse problems also. You know, the Watchtower leaders, I didn't find any of them particularly evil. If anybody was a bit crazy, it was Ted Jarris. There was definitely something amiss with him. He lost his position in Australia, and he was an American, but he was one of the youngest men to ever graduate Gilead, and North sent him to Australia. He was there I think about 5 years when there was a big problem with him. And North sent Lloyd Berry, who was the branch overseer in Japan, to Australia to look into it. And Lloyd Berry found out what it was, and they removed Jarris. And the scuttlebutt at Bethel was that Ted Jarris had molested some kids. And so he was shipped off into California. And he had a woman friend, for a number of years, and she wanted to marry him, but he didn't. He said he was never going to marry. And when he went to California, and he was removed all of his positions in the past were past tense. So he went to Victoria, and he married her, and then they didn't do much of anything for 6 months or so, and then Nora put him back into the circle work, and then little by little he worked his way up. But this man was the one who was totally against anything that we put out on child abuse. He was terrible about it. And so he was head over the service department as a governing body member, and that's why nothing was done. So we have heard since then, especially since there was the Royal Commission in Australia in 2015, some people came forward, a few people came forward and said that Ted Jarris had molested him. So it was not, my last 6 months at Bethel was nerve-wracking because I was so concerned that, and many of the writing department men also, I felt that and Lloyd Berry became a governing body member, and he was the head over writing, and so there was animosity between him and Jarris. There was Sidlek, Dan Sidlek. He wouldn't. His wife told me he wouldn't be in the same room with Jarris. Only in that weekly meeting, governing body meeting, but no other way. He was very, very odd man, and so I was so afraid that he'd find out what I was doing, that I knew all the stuff, and I had been talking to victims across the country, plus these mental health practitioners, elders my name was getting around secretly, and so elders were calling me, and it was okay. Harry Pullen, the awake editor, he permitted it, and so I was afraid if Jarris found out, he would disfellowship me in Bethel, and then when I would leave, I'd have to leave Bethel, and then nobody would believe me. So that was a prime reason we left Bethel. I had to get rid of him.
Well, since you got out, Barbara, a lot has come out on Jarris as well, and you're right on. You're nailing it well. He was kind of but he was a perverted person. Hey, Barbara, we got so many more people. Can we open up the lines that they really want to talk to you? So come on right now, hit *6. And Barbara Anderson, she's on with us tonight. She's got her program here tonight. So go ahead. What do you want to ask Barbara? You're on with us. Go ahead. Give it a second, Barbara. There's people that are coming in on our radio telephone line. So what would you like to ask Barbara? Ask her about anything at all. I mean, she's been exposing the Jehovah's Witnesses now for many years. And here she is tonight, and she's willing to do a program here on the 6 screens, and we're so glad to have her. But if you have any questions for Barbara at all, you've seen her on the Dateline program. She's been on a number of programs recently as well. So go ahead, speak up. You're on with us. Don't be shy
I
now.
have a question.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, Barbara, of all the information you've had privy to, what's the most shocking about the governing body or any individual member of the governing body that you've learned?
Well, I do think that Ted Jarris, that was the most difficult and I guess you could say shocking initially. And his actions over the years showed there's something very wrong with him. And now many of those men, the governing body members, I knew them personally. My husband and I were friends of a number of them. We did social things with them. They were good men. They were nice men. They were just, like I said, they weren't evil. I have a word for them with regards to the members and with regards to child abuse. They were stupid. They wouldn't budge. They had a belief system that they thought was for real, and they were immovable because they lived in another world. I mean, in their heads, God's kingdom was going to solve everything, and you just had to wait. And it was a difficult. I talked with Dan Sidlek a lot about the child abuse. When I say a lot, I mean I'm talking about hours and hours and hours. But one time we were together socially, my husband and I, and he and his wife in the car, and we talked about this. And he had many complaints about the organization himself. He was the one that suggested that there should be assistance in the governing body. And he said to Joe and I, he said, I think we need new blood here. It's the same old thing in this organization. So when it went, his suggestion went forward. What came out of it was that new arrangement with this assistance. And he said to us, he said, but you know what? They appointed men who were just the same as we all were from here. He said, no new blood. There's nothing new, nothing different. And he was very unhappy about that. The article about the assistance, the governing body, it was Schroeder that had one of the writers in the writing department write it, and half that article was a lie. And there were certain people at Bethel that I was really wary of. They had power, but old-time Bethelites didn't trust them. But you know, they're just people, and wherever you go, there's always the good and the bad and in the middle. And my situation was a little different than most women at Bethel. I had a son there. There were a few that had adult children there, and some of the ones had children there, older children. They came back because they had been before, and so there were many fine people. They have a belief system like we did. We were very zealous about it. But in the long run, most of those folk are deceased. Lloyd Berry was a fine man, and he became convinced about the child abuse. The problem with the multiple personalities came up. Ted Jarris was dead set against that, and but was able to prove how that works to Lloyd Berry, and he met a family on his own trip where some elders made an arrangement. Good people, you know, they had seen the results of this child abuse and trauma, And so they made arrangements for him and his wife to stay at a house during the visit, where they father and mother had 2 girls, and during the summer, as they were growing, the kids would spend it with their grandparents, and those 2 girls were molested by their grandparents, and both of those girls had MPD, which they call DID now, dissociative identity disorder, and so he gives not one experience of shock. I'm a very realistic person, and I lived a long time before I went to Bethel. I was 42 when I went to Bethel, and I'd seen it all because we were so active in the organization, and we studied with so many people. And my husband was such a active elder, and he just loved the friends. And so, but I had seen court cases. We lived in West Palm Beach, and that's a very transient area, and there was a lot of trouble area because people who were running out on their families went into West Palm Beach, and dysfunctional, troubled people were attracted to the witnesses. You can't blame them. We were promising something to make life better for them. And so the congregations in those years were the 60s and 70s had lots of dysfunctional people.
Well, you've seen a lot, Barbara. You've seen a lot. We've got a lot of people here that are kind of crowding in here. They do want to say something. So go ahead, sir. What do you want to ask Barbara?
Hey, Barbara, I wanted to ask you, because you were in the writing department. This is Gilbert. How can anybody deny all of those satanic subliminal images and all of those sexual subliminal images in the publications? And like the Live Forever book had a pornographic a cover of a magazine that was put into the Live Forever book. And how can people see the images and say, I'm not seeing that? And in the writing department, did you have to see the images? Or how does that get passed or rubber stamped? Like, yeah, we're going to go with this image. Like, for example, the songbook, the last page of the songbook, which is the most famous one. Who approves these things, and does anybody ever catch them? Thanks.
Oh, this is a subject that could be a half an hour. Okay, I was never a tour guide at Bethel. Every witness, every Bethelite, except those that have very important positions, give tours. And but people like me, we did friends and relatives tours, and so we could take them to more important places. A regular tour you did back in those years, you they didn't get into writing department or graphics, and but if you had a private tour, and maybe circuit overseer was coming through, so people like me, we could take them on a private tour, and their family or wife and husband. So in graphics, they already knew then, and we're talking about my God, it's like 1992, and they knew that this rumors were going on about the subliminal stuff. So they had on the wall, had it made up, and it was overlapping sheets of plastic. So you had 4 flat pieces of clear plastic, one over the other, and we could demonstrate, people who, like us who are doing private tours, we could demonstrate to people how the presses work. So you had the 4-color printing, says a long time ago that I even talked about this, and so we'd say, my husband would be the one, because when my husband was in Bethel in the 50s, he was in the press room, and so. But the presses, the kind of presses, the 4-color presses, they work differently than the old hole presses. And then as they went on and got into the digital era, you know, everything was so different. But it was impossible. So in graphics, the person who would come over to show my group how it worked, that anybody could sneak anything in there because it was layers. We had every magazine or book went through 17 hands. I remember that. And somebody would have caught that. And many of the majority of the paintings that were done in the art department in those years were all photographed before, you know, before anything was done with them. So, I mean, you had the painting, then you had the photography department would go in and they did their thing, and then it would go on to the graphics and they would do their thing. If there was something, as I know what I've heard as of late about the songbook and stuff, somebody would have seen that. And I have no explanation. I mean, what I see looks like what people say, but I can't vouch for that. I just know that sometimes some things look like something and it didn't, it turned out to look like it, but nobody planned it. And I can't go into and talk to you about now. There is a fellow who's an XJW who was in the graphics department in the 90s after we left Bethel. And I'll ask him. I never thought to ask him. He was the overseer of graphics for a number of years because that's where it would have to originate. Because once it went out of graphics, it was on its way to the factory. And
Well,
so
Bob, I want to step in here. Did you ever hear of Derek Barefoot?
I heard of, oh gosh, that man wrote those books, right?
Oh yeah, he wrote the book The Hour of Darkness.
I don't know.
And he's been on here 3 times, and
I have no answer for this. I read those years ago, and I can't even remember. I remember the name,
yeah,
but I moved on so far to so many other things. You know, that's what we criticized and were so into years ago. But see, everything's different. It's an entirely different organization.
well, it is very different. Now, you know, it's controversial. Not everyone believes it, and I can understand it. And Derek Barefoot wrote a book called The Hour of Darkness. And he's been on the program here before. And he started seeing these subliminal images like the caller was just talking about. And so he reported it to the Watchtower. They said, that's foolish. That's ridiculous. Don't even talk about it. And they just fellowshipped him. So Derek Barefoot's parents, they were concerned that, gee, my son got this fellowship for exposing this. So they spoke up to the Watchtower and they got this fellowship too. So, but again, it's very controversial. Some people see it, some people don't. I mean, it's not like it's not something I think that would move a person out of the organization, but it's something that is dark and very nefarious. Barbara, hey Barbara, we got a lot of people.
Rick,
go ahead. Yep.
This is Steve. One thing in the Paradise book, in the Red Paradise book, there was a picture of a theater, a movie theater, and on the marquee of the movie theater, it says Tups, Tups, through Tups, just Tups through daily, something to that effect. If you look up the definition of Tups, it means to have oral relationships with a ewe or a goat. Now, there's no way that's accidental. If the society was trying to prove a point and say there's bad things at movie theaters, wouldn't you just put up a marquee that said immorality and violence as a marquee?
Well,
why would you put the words?
Well, you'd think that. You would think that, Steve, but that's not enough. I mean, it's you got it, and I can see so many things, but a lot of people can't see it. But you know, I don't think it's going to move people out of the Watchtower. But I'm glad that you're at least in that camp. Now, we have a lot of people who want to speak up here tonight. We have a lot of people coming through on our telephone line. So would you like to say something to Barbara? She's on with us tonight. Go ahead. You're on with us.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Zachary. Barbara,
Yeah.
good to hear you. I was at Bethel around the same time you were, but I was just mid to late 80s. I have a question. Oh, go ahead. I'm looking at you on the screen. I have a question about something you just said. You mentioned multiple personality disorder, and I think you said Brother Jared was dead set against it. What was the issue with multiple personality disorder?
Jairus didn't believe that it was true. And he thought that people are making it up. And, but we have enough evidence for the rest of the governing body. It didn't matter with Jairus. Whatever he believed, he believed. And, you know, they've advanced on that in the mental health industry, I call it. They've developed, as I said, they call it a DID. And anybody who suffers extreme trauma, one of the doctors I talked to, he said he's seen cases of this where he said a teenage boy was in a fire, and when they were having to work on him and stripping his skin off, the burned skin, the trauma was so great on him that to escape that, it's like they escaped their mind the alternative of this MPD is insanity or death. And so most healthy people originally, when they go through such trauma, they don't go insane and they don't die, but they find a way to escape. And so then as the years pass, they get, it's so complex. I read everything I could on it. Years ago, I was an expert on it, but it isn't an in thing anymore. The doctors deal with people who have these situations, and it doesn't make the press and whatever.
Let me tell you why I asked that question.
Okay.
Back in the early 90s, I was an elder. That's when I first became an elder, and I had become an elder, and we had a kingdom ministry school, and the major subject, I think it was the head instructor was Brother Bro.
Yes.
Who I see on
Gary Bro. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brother Bro, and what they brought out at that school, it had a lot to do with, I guess, mental illness, multiple personality disorder.
Exactly. That's what they did at that particular elder school. Yes, it was right after.
Yes. Yes, and there was a lot of information about. That's where they came up, or they developed their ideas about how when there's child molestation or there's a accusation, and there was that two witness rule, all that stuff, and what happens if the person doesn't if the person's accused and they don't admit it, and then it's one person's word against the other. But back to that multiple personality disorder, they raised the question: what happens if you have a person who commits fornication and they make the claim that they have multiple personality disorder and one of their other personalities committed the sin?
Yeah.
So how do they decide? And they came up with the way they explained it to the elders is, at baptism, there was a body that went under the water. There was a body that, said yes, yes, and that body went underwater. And they said that's the body that you deal with when it comes to judicial matters where someone claims that they committed their act under one of their other personalities. So that's why, as soon as you said multiple personality disorder, that was of great interest. And
That was
what it
that.
sounds
Yeah,
like,
it was a big subject. It was only amongst a select few in the writing department and the service department. Very few, and it was so controversial. We were able to. Well, this kind of thing that it's hard in a situation like this to go back and try to tell you everything that went on, but the overall
no,
society
that's
got into too many things and had no business to be into. They didn't leave this in the hands of the experts. They always had to try to find a scriptural application for everything, and the members suffered. This is isogenic. Isogenic is where you have a problem and you try to fit a scripture to it. And this has been the problem of the Jehovah's Witnesses for years. Instead of just having a belief system and a dogma like other religions have, it's yours. But this organization's got to get into it and take 3,500-year-old verses of the Bible and try to apply it. That is what I can talk about forever. I can go on and on because this is the background of the problems in this organization. You're dealing with all of this right now.
Me with
Go ahead.
Yeah, what you helped me with, my problem is I keep looking at the screen and I'm seeing you still talking and I'm not listening to the phone right. I'm hearing everything you're saying.
Well, there's a delay.
Yes. No, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm turning away from the screen. What you helped me with, Sister Anderson, Barbara, is at that school, there was a part of me that said, oh, they're not accepting any claims of multiple personality disorder. They're not accepting that. They are treating this person like a person who does not have the disorder.
That's right.
And all these years, I've kind of wondered about it, and you just answered the question for me.
There's a lot more to talk about, and I think I have on my website where I talk about my life to do a lot of that in there. It's not my life before I was a witness. It starts as when I became very active in there, and I go point by point. I think it's 40 some odd pages, but I go point into what happened in the writing department. MPD just practically broke up the writing department and the service department. They were all, listen, I lived through that. They were almost enemies in the two departments. They over these issues that they had no business being involved in. And
can you repeat that? You said someone or something almost broke up the writing department and another department. Can you repeat that, please?
Service. It broke up their relationship. Ted Jarris was over the service department. Lloyd Berry was over the writing department. We had the writing correspondence area. They were getting letters galore. I have copies of the letters galore to this day in my lockbox at the bank from people that were involved in all of this. I heard from elders across the country privately that they were dealing with MPD, but remember, this was also a very, very big deal out in the world too. It was like in fact, the service department said it was a fad. That's the exact words they used. And it was I wouldn't want to go back and live through what I lived through back then in confusion. And I'm a reader, and I was studying the stuff inside and out. And then you talk to some, there's a lot of heads at Bethel, by the way, too many. And everybody who was involved in this had an opinion. But you had to be careful of what you said, because you could end up with the wrong opinion as far as somebody else was concerned. My husband went to the same, of course, he went to the same class you did, only we were home in Nashville. He was at the school for the elders in Nashville when they had that school on child abuse and other things. And when he walked in the door, he saw the man who came from Bethel to conduct that one. That was purposely done. They sent him. He was one of the on the service department committee. And so when he saw Joe come in the door, he went right over to him, and he said, I hear Barbara's not attending meetings very much anymore. And Joe says, no. And he says, he said, it's over the child abuse. And so they got to talking, and Joe my husband did a wonderful job talking to him about that. When the school was over and this man was dismissing everybody, he was sitting on the platform at the Kingdom Hall, and he was very calm, my husband said, and he said to all those 200 elders, and he said, please remember this. We can talk and talk and talk about this issue on child abuse. He said, but you have to remember, brothers, this is because what my husband told him, and my husband sat there with his eyes wide open and said, I was shocked. He quoted me. He said to the elders, remember this, child abuse is just not a sin. It's a crime. That's what they didn't get. It doesn't matter. You could talk about all of these issues, MPD, all the psychological problems, all of this. But we have to face it. And it was all the other churches, they all were having the same problems. The Episcopal Church is one of the few that, once they realized the depth of the problem, they started to put in policies and practices that protected not only the church, but the children. Jehovah's Witnesses didn't do it.
Yeah.
Didn't do it because you know why?
Now, Barbara, can I ask you this? Can I ask you this about that school? Do you think that school, that the subject matter of that school in the early 90s, that Kingdom Ministry School, do you think the subject matter for that school was because of the work you were doing at Bethel?
Yes, of course. It was an elder school, not a Kingdom Ministry School. And yes, it was exactly that. What I was
the elder school is Kingdom Ministry School.
Well, whatever. Go ahead. That was a result of that year. That year.
I might be thinking ministerial training school. No, I'm asking, do you think that the subject matter for that school was because of the work that you had done at Bethel, that what you had exposed, the stuff you exposed?
Yes, of course. It
So
was.
it brought your attention.
Yes, because this man who was there from Bethel to teach that class, he acknowledged that, and he knew all about my involvement, which very few knew about my involvement in this. And in fact, his fleshly brother was my overseer on the Farmer's book in the writing department. And so they talked to each other. And my overseer, as the compiler of the Proclaimer's book, he had no idea of what I was doing on the side to do with the child abuse. When I finished the Proclaimer's book research, I had another year. I still was at Bethel. I mean, I didn't know I was going to leave in a year. But that year, Lloyd Berry came to me and said that they were going to change, since I've finished with the research, he says, we're going to put you on the Awake magazine, and you're going to do the research for the compilers of the Awake. Well, the head of the Awake magazine, the editor, was Harry Paloyan, and he's the one that talked to me about all of this child abuse, and because I was a mother, and he said, and he was at Bethel 40 years, and he said, I can't talk to my wife about this. She lives in La La Land here at Bethel all these years. He said she couldn't take it. He said, I have to talk to some woman here about this issue. And I don't know, I was a very active mother in the organization before I came to Bethel, and they knew it. They knew what Joe and I and what we were involved with on the outside. And my husband had such a good, report from his years. He pioneered on and off for years before we went to Bethel. So that's the only reason why we had such respect. We went into Bethel not as new people.
I do remember you. I remember seeing you. You sat up on that platform in the tower's dining room, in one of the tower's dining rooms.
Exactly.
You were up on like a platform next to Al Jensen's table, and you
sat
were
at Harley Miller's table.
son.
That's right. He was at Bob Wallen's table.
Yeah, and you were sitting with your your husband and your son. Your husband was either the table foot, and you and your son were his shoulders.
Well, no, eventually that was the case. But my son, when we first went in, he was at Bob Wallen's table, down in the not up on the balcony thing. We were with Harley Miller's table.
Okay, I only sat across near you one time, but I have another question. You mentioned the writing committee and the service committee, almost, this disagreement between them because of Brother Jared. There's a question I always wondered about. The teaching committee, they come up with those things that should be taught, and they affect sometimes what the writing committee writes. Is there ever disagreement between those two committees, the teaching committee and the writing committee? Well,
of course, they're just human. There are so many things to talk about here. I was working on something for the Proclaimer's book, and it was on the 30th chapter of the Proclaimer's book, which is on the Constitution and the Jehovah's Witnesses lawsuits, the 47 lawsuits that Jehovah's Witnesses won at the Supreme Court level. So that's that chapter I worked on. And okay, so became very familiar with all of that, and there are so many issues connected with that witnesses don't know. I began to learn, because I had to spend hours and hours researching on the background of a long gone history, things that happened in the 30s and the 40s in the organization, learning a lot about the Constitution. And it was a fascinating life. But the people in it were just ordinary, like me and my husband. We were just people. And there was some of us had more assets and deficits than others. But all in all, I have to say that, and you know yourself that from being there, that we pretty much, people got along. There were some problems. You can't put 4,000 people together like in those years, and I was there, and not have issues. But we were older when we went in. And so we were like peers rather than the new, they call them new boys. They don't never say new girls, but new boys come in. And they have to work their way up. But we came in as peers. And my husband was picking up where he left off 20 years before, with men who stayed at Bethel, and they got old there. As my husband goes back to Bethel 20 years later, and he's got a son at that age who's at Bethel. So that's why we were treated differently. And we were, I also had a background in accounting outside. I had a background in many things that when they found out, they were, especially in engineering, they were picking my brain, because a lot of the things that were at Bethel were old. They set up the stuff years before, and they didn't modernize, and they were having problems. That's not the Bethel today. I went at a time of transition when there was two roads they had to go. It's either modernize or stay the way you are and see what happens. Well,
Well, Barbara, I want to step in here. I want to step in here before we get too far into this. We appreciate Zachary coming and asking some questions, but we only have about 15, 20 minutes left.
oh, we got to do Ergali's thing.
Yeah, well, that's it. We got to get into a galley. I appreciate all the people asking questions and what have you, but we do have to get into a galley now. This has to do with what happened just in late September 2022, just a few weeks back.
September 28th.
Yeah, in fact, it has to do with the OSCE. Now, that's really what brought us together, and this is monumental.
Yes.
We have a lot of apostates here in America. I mean, we really do. A lot of outspoken people that speak out against the Watchtower. But in Europe, there's not that many. And I have heard this before, and many people calling into the program, they say, Rick, you guys in America are really outspoken. We don't have that much in Europe. But anyways, we're talking about the OSCE. And you say, well, what is that? It's the Organization in Europe for Security and Cooperation in Europe.
Right.
57 states are in this arrangement. And what it is they are trying to bring comprehensive security to that area, to that region in Europe. So
it's an old organization, and it's comparable to the UN.
Yes, it's very comparable to the UN.
And it's a political organization.
As a matter of fact, they somewhat they're called an observer. The OSCE has observer status in the General Assembly of the United Nations, which makes it very, very close. It's just like a regional United Nations. But anyways, we had a man named Ergali, and he was an ex-witness.
His last name is a bishop.
Yeah. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about Ergali? We're going to play. In fact, you want me to play the clip of Ergali?
Yes, please do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's play the clip of Ergali. Now, this is an ex-Jehovah's Witness, friends. And he's speaking up at this huge conference. They did give him some time to talk. He does have an interpreter there. So what I want to do right now is I want to share the screen. So let me just get in here and share the screen of Ergali, I should say, speaking up in the OCE conference. So let's see if we can't get him on here right now. So let's do that. Let's share it. You'll hear him. You listen. It's about a 3-minute clip. Then we'll bring it back to Barbara and let's talk about it.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. The main activity of my foundation is to ensure human rights and to defend the interests of existing and former members of the Jehovah's community who turn to me for help. The modern development of religious relations throughout the world has increased the vulnerability of citizens from the antisocial activities of different individual religious organizations using the support of the secular. Well, I was giving a situation of 2 young people in Almaty. Recently, my organization went to the Jehovah's Witnesses in Taras. There was a parishioner who was a boy who was victim of sexual abuse by an adult minister. And actually it turned out that 4 more children suffered. But currently they cannot leave the organization. So, dear participants, I have to state that there is a practice of child abuse among Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a grave sin. And the worst thing is that in order to preserve the image of this community, the elders forbid the victims and their parents to talk about these incidents. So actually there are many cases ideologically motivated to hide these despicable practices. But we are not share the positive emotions of those who are happy that some organizations are deemed extremist or undesirable in Russia. No, we believe that everyone has the right to their belief, but we're talking about some extremes some extreme religious practices that lead to grave consequences. And also, the right of free speech is also being violated. For those reasons, there is lack of tolerance of some of the members of the society against religious organizations. But this might be a way to discriminate many organizations. At the end of my speech, I draw the attention of the OSCE administration to exclude the use of unbiblical and anti-human internal punitive body, the legal committee. And I recommend the government of Kazakhstan to develop effective measures to provide social and legal support of those citizens who are affected by inhuman activities of Jehovah's Witnesses. Thank you.
Well, there you are. That was Igali, and he was willing to come on. He traveled from Kazakhstan, and he came to Poland. And my goodness, he was so glad to be able to speak up about this.
That was the second time he spoke in 2019, and this is a yearly conference. And so then, because of the pandemic, they didn't have us. He got on, and they Watchtower was not very happy about it. They did not get on this time. They've been closely associated with this political organization, and for years. And Jeffrey Jackson was there at the conference, and he heard what Igali said, and then he left. But they did not participate as a speaker. And but I have heard over the years about this, and some of the very, very wonderful ex-JWs who are extremely intelligent have been following this, which I'm not in that league, and saying that why would the Watchtower be so involved in something that is absolutely political, involved in everything you can imagine for the peace of Europe. And I got paperwork galore on this. Igali took screenshots on his phone of some things that he was able to see because he was a speaker there the second time. He was able to look at personal things at the conference in their files, showed the Watchtower was doing this and this and this and this. And I could barely make it out on the screenshot, but he has all of that. And
yeah, what I'm trying to extract from all of this, Barbara, and I want the audience to know that, as I said earlier, we have a lot of people that are fighting against the Watchtower here in the United States. Kazakhstan over there in Europe is not really, it's not a rich country. And we're going to talk a little bit about this as well concerning trying to help Igali. He is speaking out. There's not a lot of people in that area that are speaking out against Jehovah's Witnesses. So we really need the world to speak out. It's one thing for us apostates here in America to speak out, but we got to really encourage the world to speak out and let the world know how evil this organization is. So Igali did that in Poland, and we really applaud him for doing that. And I mean, really, when it came down to brass tacks, he needed funds to get there, a lot of money to come from Kazakhstan to Warsaw, Poland. So, I know that, is there a GoFundMe page or something? Yeah. Go ahead.
May I talk to Barbara Anderson?
yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
Barbara, I wanted to talk to you about Raymond Cruz. Did he know about the alleged CSA reports going on, and did he try to do anything about it? And why did Raymond France abruptly resign from the governing body in 1980?
or did you say Raymond Franz? It wasn't clear.
Yeah, that's him.
Yes, I knew Raymond. Yeah, we were at his home. I didn't know him, of course, when he was Bethel, but after he left, and he's outside of Atlanta, Georgia. We were an hour and a half from where they lived, and he was a wonderful man. His books have certainly been responsible for a tremendous change in the organization. And when he was at the last years of his life at Bethel, I know many things about that. I haven't got the time to talk about it now. Maybe we can do it in the future and just talk about Raymond. I know things, and I'm not the only one, but we were close involved with all of this. And so I can elaborate on this for those who are interested in that. Right now, we're talking about Ergali because he has been putting his own personal money, just like Ray did, to get a point across. And Ergali has done that. And it was very, very expensive for him to go to that conference. And always in Kazakhstan, any lawsuits that came about in the years past against Jehovah's Witnesses, the witnesses won them, but not the past 4. And Ergali was part of the reason why they lost. This was a convert to Jehovah's Witnesses when he was 16 years old, very intelligent. The elders started using him. Eventually, he was working with the society's lawyers there. He got to know the inner circle. He knew a lot about the organization, and he left it because of his involvement with the United Nations. And so this is a man who has spent thousands of dollars. He took the Watchtower to court and won the case. It was over his son. His young son, who he and his wife left the organization, and the elders tried to get his 10-year-old son back into the organization, which was even illegal by law in that country, to try to get a child into a religion when the parents are not into it. And so he won that case. And then he put up his own money for the other 3 cases. Had to pay for lawyers coming in for this, and they don't pay very much in these civil cases in that part of the world. So they would get $5,000. The Watchtower would have to pay. Well, the last 2 cases, the Watchtower, from what I gathered, won't pay. They were guilty, and they didn't pay. And so the Watchtower knows that Ergali is after him. Things are changing, and we need him over in that part of the world, in Eastern Europe there, to expose the Watchtower. The Watchtower has been taking money, and they have lied about human rights. They said they're the advocates for human rights, and absolutely the opposite. They are not the advocate for human rights. His witnesses don't have any human rights. And so Ergali is exposed them, and that's why they didn't get on talking this time at the conference. And Jackson was there, and he listened to Ergali, and then he disappeared. And 3 or 4 days later, he was back in New York and at the annual meeting. So Ergali, when I heard about what was happening, that he didn't think he could make it, it was $2,300, I believe he needed. He had $800, that's all he had. And they don't have motels like in Warsaw like we have, cheap places, if there is such a thing anymore. And so we didn't know what to do. And so it was like I had 4 days to get him $1,500 so he could get there and stay there for 10 days. And so that's what we did. We were able to do this personally. And we sent him, had a Russian who is not a JW, but who understands all the JW stuff. And he wired Ergali. I sent him and he wired Ergali. And so Ergali was able to then complete his stay and whatever. He also put up money for these 4 lawsuits. it's not fair. We need to reimburse him. And so that's why I started a GoFundMe. I've never done this before. I've never asked her a dime from the witnesses all these years. In 2007, I put out a CD which had 5,000 pages of court documents on that I had discovered. Cost Joe and I $5,000, $1 a page back then. And I put that CD out. Nobody donated. They bought it. And they got stuff that has been, since then, the lawyers around this world have been so impressed because we had stuff in there nobody ever knew that the Watchtower was lying in court. And so, but I didn't take donations. On my website, I say I don't take donations. If I can't do my thing with child abuse, I'm not going to ask money for it. I'll do it until I can't afford it. And anyway, it's not that expensive to have to do what I do. But this man is got a foot in the door, and we'd love to get him to other conferences, and so he could tell the truth to these public figures. Watchtower is posing as like an angel to them. He's not. They aren't. Neither is Jackson. Jackson is a man that I will tell you surprises me with the question someone asked me before about. He surprises me. I know quite a bit about his background. And I'm not going to defame the man, but, you know, they're not godlike, that's for sure. None of them are. They're just humans. So here we can show the world that this organization is not what they are.
Well, Barbara, you got a GoFundMe page for Igali and to help them to get the message out over there in Europe. So
we have $15 short of $1,000.
All right. So what do they do?
I sent $1,500 to him. So I hope to get reimbursed. Joe and I hope to get reimbursed. If there 1,500 people will send $1 to there, we can, all of us, we can do something. Well, you know, some of the XJWs take money and they use it as to live on. Here's a man who's not going to live on it. He's using to do the thing that all of us try to do in our personal life, is to expose the Watchtower's harm. So that's all I want to do.
Well, tell them what do they have to do? In other words, if a person wants to put a few bucks in there to help Igali and get the word out in Europe, where do they go? Tell them where they go.
The GoFundMe. It's on my website on watchtowerdocuments.org. Just scroll down on the first page, and it discusses him, and then it has the page where you go fund me. And there it shows it has 700, I think, in $75, $80. Anyway, somebody sent me home here at the house $250 towards it. So we have $985. And
well, it's a good cause. It's not. It certainly isn't.
He's not going to live on. He needs to pay his bills. He took loans out of the bank, and that's a very poor country. And so he took loans out for the lawsuits to pay the court costs for the other people who won their cases because the Watchtower won't pay. And let's see what
happens. We'll see if we can't get people. Go to watchtowerdocuments.org. Check it all out. It's on Barbara's site. But Barbara, we do have probably about 10 minutes left here, so let's see if we can't bring some more people in. They got some questions. Go ahead, you're on.
Barbara?
Go ahead.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, talk to Barbara.
Is this a guy?
Yes.
Well, Guy, just back off for a second, okay? Back off for a second. We got a lot of people who want to call in. I know you already talked to Barbara once, so just back off. Let's get some new people, then we can bring you back on, Guy, if we get time. Go ahead, caller. You're new on here. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say hello to Barbara Anderson, and I'm sorry about your son not speaking to you anymore, but thank you for your courage for speaking out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My question was, when you're writing the Proclaimer's book and stuff, was it, did anything that you were writing ever wean your faith or anything, or was it just what you found out about the child molestation stuff? Or because I know a lot of witnesses that even like me that read the Proclaimer's book found out a lot of faults in the organization. Did any of that ever bother you while you were writing that?
No. I called it people. I called it people junk.
Also, I wonder if you're still a Christian.
You know, I had to deal with it. I called it people junk because people do crazy stuff. So, you know, we're not all identical. Beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. Isn't that true? And so people make decisions according to their ideas, their theories. So, you know, what goes on behind closed doors. We're all so different and unique. So I couldn't blame the organization for the idiosyncrasies of we humans. But when the child abuse was a totally different thing, I was willing to die at Armageddon. That's how serious this was. I talked to the victims galore. My husband talked to a few of them, and he was so dumbfounded he couldn't handle it. And so I said, I have to do something about this. If God's going to kill me, I don't care, because I can't live like this. I can't sleep at night. I worried so much. I'm a mom. Anybody who's a parent who's decent is not going to allow this to happen and know about it. If I didn't know about it, it would be different, but I knew and I couldn't live with it. And so, you know what? The Watchtower, they have that attached to the name. So they have reinvented themselves, and they have to. When you can't, child abuse, I mean, the Catholic Church has child abuse attached to it, and the pews are half empty. Well, that's the way the Watchtower is. So they've reinvented themselves. It's nothing like the organization was when I was at headquarters, or even 20 years ago. Nothing like it. And so,
are you still Christian?
Okay, let me tell you what I am. I don't discuss it. I have said this from the get-go. I am not discussing religion or my personal beliefs. It has nothing to do with the subject of the harm of the Watchtower. And the harm is not just child abuse. The harm is in people's personal lives, how they're treated, the suicides. I got 4 suicides just in this past year of people I knew. And it is because these men who have ruled this organization did not love the members. They didn't care about the members. They just cared about an organization. And that, listen, I don't care how much you love God, you're never, ever going to put up with what I saw and dealt with that this organization allowed to happen to children and women.
Could I ask a couple questions, please?
You sure can. I'm answering fast because we only have 10 minutes.
Okay. Did you know Fred France by any chance?
Absolutely did know Fred France. Absolutely.
Okay. Right.
I did his, I went through his office, every book in his office after he was in the infirmary and mentally ill and so old and blind. And I had to go through everything in his office. Oh boy, did I find a lot of nice, juicy stuff. Yeah, you know, I mean, I call it that, but it's people junk.
Yeah. So did he do the New World Translation of the Bible?
He was part of it, but the very most interesting thing about that is that he was very good friends of Jewish man Horowitz in the Astoria congregation. And that man had free reign to come into Bethel and wander around. He never had to have a host. Everybody else, if you came to Bethel, you had to have a Bethelite take you around, even to an office, if they were going to be delivered to an office. Not this guy.
Did he know the Hebrew language? Did he know the Hebrew language?
No, France did not. The Horowitz did, and he's the one that
in court
did a lot of the work. And I was
Canada, he said he did.
Let me tell you that. Oh, there's been a lot of discussion, and that was straightened out years ago what that was all about. So,
okay.
Horowitz was in an office that I was in one day, and he was furious. And I was just amazed that he was talking with one of the senior writers, and I happened to be there when Horace walked in, and they didn't tell me to leave. He was so furious over an article in the Watchtower that came out, and he said whoever wrote this didn't know what they were talking about. And he went in, and we don't have enough time. I would elaborate. I'll tell you exactly the article and the baloney that was in there. And I mean, there were other people like that too that were part of Franz's life. Franz had a very, very close friend, a wrestler out in California. He used to go on vacation out there periodically. The guy was disfellowshipped, but he was Franz's best friend. But he didn't have to be obedient and shun the man. He had two standards. He was a very odd man, I got to tell you. But he was funny. He had a good sense of humor and a great singing voice.
Did he know all the languages that he said he did? Because he told me he knew 10 different languages.
Oh,
but
my God.
He didn't know Hebrew.
He must have been already into dementia when he said that, because he did not. He says so. He says so. He did not know. Let me tell you, there was a reporter who...
okay, I've got a couple more questions. Hang on.
I have a lot of answers.
You know? Date. Did he believe in that 1975 date?
Yeah, it was his. In fact, Harry Poloyan went to Jairus. He went to Lloyd Berry. They had a meeting, and they were appointing people to be the assistants to governing body. And Harry didn't make it. Jairus prevented it because of the child abuse, so he wouldn't recommend it. So he goes in to talk to Lloyd Berry, and he's mad. And he said, he told him off is actually what he did, and he told me all about what happened. So we got on the topic that you're asking about, and he says, I went into, when they made Freddie the president, and he says, I went in there and I told Lloyd a thing or two about that. He said, how can you make this man the president of this organization who came up with this idea of 1975, and we lost 500,000 people over 1975, and you make him president? How could you do this? And he says, Lloyd says, well, he was next in line. These are just people. There's no Holy Spirit there.
Yeah, when I talked to him, I believed that he didn't believe 1975. I also knew that he said he knew Hebrew. I talked to him. He didn't know a first grade Hebrew, and so I was very skeptic after I talked to him before.
Good for you.
So that was the start of my downfall. But anyway, there's one more thing that he believed in a presidency, not a governing body. Am I correct?
He did not believe in the governing body. He was dead set against it. But you remember, he was a governing body member. Nor, Freddie, and Souter were the governing body. They were the governing body of the corporations. And so they were the governing body of the entire organization. And they lost their power because of this, the governing body idea, which, who came up with that? Ray Franz. Ray Franz is responsible for that. Not, and he was angry. He wouldn't even explain and talk to Ray about it when Ray went to talk to him about this stuff. He wouldn't. They weren't on good terms towards the end.
And so you knew all this stuff, just like I did. How come you stayed in for so long and I got out?
Well, listen, I told you, it's just people stuff. But the Bible was different to me. That I saw with my own eyes as a Catholic girl, the scriptures of Genesis losing a paradise earth, and Revelation restoring a paradise earth. All my life, all my young life, I wanted to understand the Bible. And I couldn't figure it out. I'd get through Genesis and go crazy because it was the same old repetition. But the witnesses explained that there was a reason for our lives. There's and so it made so much sense. And I didn't understand so much. I took it literally, this literally. I looked at, they painted a picture and of something, which was a rerun on the Puritans' actual ideas of the Bible. And it was, Russell, it was a rerun religion. And they tried to go back to primitive Christianity. That's what the Puritans and the Pilgrims were trying to do, is go back to primitive Christianity. And over the years, the history, I've studied the history of religion, all these books everywhere, and all the changes in it. You know, it's been an extraordinary experience to do all of this. Do I have a definite sense of I have all the answers? Absolutely no. Nobody has the answers. They read between the lines and come up with a belief. I have my own personal, that's mine. I don't want to press them on anybody else.
I'd just like to share a scripture with you, 1 Peter 2:9. Sometimes you get a chance to read that. I'd appreciate it if you did that.
Sure, I'm glad to do
your identity.
Yeah. What was the last word?
I said, I hope that she could read 1 Peter 2:9.
Yeah.
Like most Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they lose who they are. They lose their identity of who they are. In God's word, he tells you who you are.
Okay.
And I hope that the sister could read that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Michael, this is Rick. Before you take off here on us, I know we've been trying to get in contact with you. I know you want to tell your story. What's your chances of coming on tomorrow at 2:00 for ex-witnesses to give their Christian testimony? You want to do that? Can you do that tomorrow?
I can't do it tomorrow. I'm playing at a fair tomorrow, and
okay, all right.
But I could do it next. I could plan for next week if you like.
Well, plan for 2 weeks from then. But I'm trying to get you on the program here. I know you want to tell your story, but I'll be in touch with you anyway. So plan on 2 weeks. You're going to be coming on this program that we have on Sunday. Okay, Mike?
Okay.
All right.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Mike. All right. Well, Barbara, my goodness gracious, it looks like we're just about to the end of the rope here.
In an hour and a half, you can't tell it all in an hour and a half. And I know I really don't have any intentions. I'd like to, as you have asked me to come back in the future, I'd like to take one subject and really go into it at great lengths so that people will get an understanding of things that they never, ever had thought that there was something about it. And it's fascinating. I don't make it up. It's all researched out, and my background at Bethel helped me. I actually am responsible for a teaching in the organization. When I was studying the Russells, for instance, I saw the same topic over and over again in all of the old stuff, over and over again, and I saved the paperwork, made a copy of a page I read. And so I gave it to the Awake editor at one point, and he said, "What a question!" I said, "Well, they've been asking this question for years, and there's this answer, that answer, this answer, that answer." I said, "Are they gonna keep writing about this and always changing their mind on it?" He sent it to the teaching committee, and 6 months later, they got the answer back. That's a very interesting story, too. I'm just leading you on here. There's all kinds of stories from the inside. Remember, they're just people.
Well, that's why we want to get your footprints here on the 6 screens, Barbara. We have so much to share. Yeah. So we're going to do it little by little. So if all goes well and you're up to it, we're going to see you back again in 2 weeks. And you and I will be in touch in the meantime, okay?
And I have experiences of other people that I'm telling you, I have met so many endearing ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who have a story to tell, and they won't come on this, and they won't. There's so many people who's too shy, but their stories are remarkable. So to share them, well, I said to this one lady who was crying because she was so upset because she was disfellowshipped for apostasy. And I said to her, I gave her a big hug. This was at a conference. And I said to her, "You're free. Remember this, you're free." And 5 years later, she wrote me through Facebook. And this happened in 2009. And then she wrote me just last year. And she thanks me because I gave her the facts and I told her she was free. That's all I can do. I want people to be free. Life is short. Be free, not be held in captivity to things that are, they don't hold any water.
Well, I'm with you. No, and well, you kind of proved that tonight. So in 2 weeks, you're going to come back. All goes well. I'll be in touch with you, and don't you ever change. You just keep staying Barbara.
I changed. I got this old with the same personality. My God.
We love you for coming on and telling your stories, and we'll get it all here on the 6 Screens. Thank you, Barbara. We'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll be in touch with you this week. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to say goodnight to all the listeners, and I hope you come back. You never know what you're going to hear from this mouth right here.
Well, say hello to Joe, too. We always show the best.
I will.
Thank you.
I'll try to drag him in front of this camera one of these days.
Get him out here. Get him out here so we can talk to him, too. Thank you very much, Barbara. Keep waving that flag of victory. Yeah. Well, there you go. That's Barbara Anderson. Well, you all love Barbara, right? Well, boy, we had a lot of people coming into the program tonight. She'll be back with us in 2 weeks. We're going to end this broadcast right now, but we have a Pasta Babe. She's coming on next with her Healing After the Watchtower program. So we're going to end this program now, and we got a Pasta Babe coming on next. Thank you very much. We had a good broadcast tonight.